developed countries like, Japan, United States, their debts are mostly denominated in their own currencies. And so those hyperinflationary events tend to have those couple recipes. Yeah, so my long-term outlook is to eventually see a higher rate of inflation with a degree of currency devaluation. So basically, the money supply would grow very substantially, and the individual buying power of those currency units would go down pretty significantly compared to a variety of hard assets. And so that's kind of the long-term outlook. And so a lot of the work I do is the probability of getting there and kind of the path dependency, the different kind of decision points that can lead to get there faster or slower than other potential paths.
But you also, one of your programs, you talked about the book called The History of the World or something?
Lessons of History. Yeah, it was Lessons of History.
So
Yeah.
I ordered that book because you recommend. I haven't got it yet. Yeah. But what I'm really trying to say to people, the reason, once I understood in 1971 when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, at that time I was flying in Vietnam, and I knew something was going to change. And that's where quantum comes in versus Newtonian. And I wanted to know what the quantum would be. What would be like the ripple effect? What would the global effect be? So, and the other reason is because I studied history. Lenin said years and years ago, before Stalin, the best way to kill capitalism is to debauch the currency. So in 71, when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, I went to military school, so I studied military economics. And military economics was very concerned about guys like Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini, Mao. And that's who we studied. And then socialist economics is Keynesian, which is you can print as much money as you like. And then capitalist economics, we were taught, was Mises' Austrian school, hard money, which is where Bitcoin and gold and silver kind of fit in. So when you look at the end, I think the end is coming. You can only, historically, like we had the Weimar Republic, which brought Hitler to power. Are you familiar with that? I'm sure you are. Yeah. What happened? Tell me what happened in the Weimar Republic, which brought Hitler to power. Wasn't it exactly what you said? The currency was gone, inflation went up.
Yeah, I mean, back then, so after World War I, of course, Germany's production base was destroyed. And whenever you have a country with its productive base kind of damaged, plus they had external war reparations. So they had debts that they couldn't print away. It wasn't denominated in their own currency. And so they eventually experienced a hyperinflation as they basically printed money to finance deficits. Just because, after losing the war, after having all this, very challenging political and financial situation, you had more and more kind of populism and extremism build up, and then it took a really dark path.
But the thing, that's where hyperinflation set in. And the other word you said in there was reparations. And my concern is, I'm not trying to be racist here, but when the blacks, Americans are trying to get reparations for slavery, that's what happened in 1918 with the Treaty of Versailles, was they forced the German people to pay reparations to England and France. And that led to hyperinflation and then the rise of Hitler. So that's kind of, as an old guy and then went to military school again, that's what we studied. So the reason I was excited about you coming on the program is you're a lot younger, but you also understand history. And that's kind of what happened in 71 when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. They could print as much as they liked. It's the same thing that happened after 1918 with the Treaty of Versailles. They couldn't pay their bills. So the Weimar Republic just printed as much money as possible. And that's where the funny story comes in. A woman goes to the supermarket with a wheelbarrow full of cash, Reichsmark, and she goes inside to pay for her pork chop. And she comes out and they stole her wheelbarrow and left the cash. So Lyn, that always sits in my head. So when Sarah booked this program with you, I wanted to get your picture of pork chops and wheelbarrows. I mean, what's going to happen here?
So my long-term base case for the United States is for a higher inflation, but not necessarily hyperinflation. And because whenever we see cases of hyperinflation, like Weimar, like some emerging markets, generally you need a combination of a couple things. One is you needed a destruction of your productive base. And so that happened in the Weimar Republic, that happened in Zimbabwe, and that can be due to a lost war, or it can be due to really bad internal social policies.
Is what's happening in Venezuela today?
Yes, exactly. That's another case of hyperinflation happening. And so you have that kind of severe drawdown in the productive base. So they can't make enough goods and services to satisfy their needs. So regardless of how much money they print, the prices start going up rapidly. A second thing that helps contribute to hyperinflation is when they owe debt in a currency they can't print. So a lot of emerging markets today, like Argentina, for example, they owe debt that's denominated in dollars. Whereas developed countries like, Japan, United States, their debts are mostly denominated in their own currencies. And so those hyperinflationary events tend to have those couple recipes. But for example, you often refer to the 1971 period, and that was a case of rapid inflation for the United States, but it didn't reach the levels of hyperinflation because we still had our productive base. We didn't have a collapse in our economy. We just had a really sharp devaluation of currency. And so it was something that the currency wasn't completely obliterated, it was just severely damaged. And that's kind of the outcome is a base case, I think, going forward over the next decade, is that you can see in developed countries pretty significant currency devaluation.
So that's my question. So what's your crystal ball say between 2020 and 2030? Okay, I make fun of Biden, and I call his cabinet the monsters. I've got to entertain myself because I flunked out of school. I was watching TV too much. And, I say when Janet Yellen was head of the Treasury, head of the Fed, and because we don't know if they made it in, at the time of this broadcast, we don't know if they've made it yet. And if Janet Yellen becomes head of the Treasury, that's separate. The separation between the Fed and the government are gone. They're one now. And so that's the reason I'm excited about having you come on the program, is given your, what I call quantum or quantum physics thinking. What's going to happen when the monster takes over?
So I think this process is probably going to take several years to play out. And so it's going to start, I think, in the next handful of years. And it's one of those things where at first, when you get some degree of, they call it reflation, like you start from like a low period of inflation, you get that kind of higher inflation. At first, it can feel good to a lot of people. And so, for example, that's what it felt like this year, when stimulus checks go out and when you have that kind of rebound. And so next year, if you get a decline in the dollar versus other currencies, if you get inflation that goes up to, the official way they measure it, which, that's a whole nother discussion, but if that goes up to 2-3%, in the next, maybe 2 years, that can feel good at first. And then the problem is, at that point, they're very likely to overshoot. Because a lot of their deficits at this point are structural, right? So even just taking out discretionary spending, if you just focus on entitlements and military and interest on the debt, that already is pretty much all incoming tax receipts. And so
Lyn, we crushed the economy. It's exactly as you said. What happened in Germany was it crushed production. And that's why when I asked Sarah to invite you on this program, I want to know what your crystal ball says. We've done everything exactly as the Weimar Republic did with the economy. It was had to pay reparations. The economy was crushed, production went out. Same thing happened in Zimbabwe, same thing in Venezuela. So I want to know what Lyn Alden's crystal ball says 2020 on.